Stop. Don't spend that coin. That tiny date or mint mark could make it worth thousands of dollars. Look closely, because your next big discovery might be hiding right in your pocket. Today, we are looking at a very interesting United States 10-cent coin, the 1967 Roosevelt dime, with no mint mark. If you have one of these dimes, you may be wondering whether the missing mint mark means you have a rare coin worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The answer may surprise you, because the missing mint mark on a 1967 dime is completely normal. But there are still some very important details that can make certain examples much more valuable. The coin we are discussing is the 1967 Roosevelt dime. It was produced during a very unusual period in American coinage. The United States was experiencing a major coin shortage, and the mint was trying to discourage people from saving coins because of their silver content. As part of the changes introduced during the 1960s, mint marks were removed from circulating coins dated 1965 through 1967. That means a 1967 dime without a mint mark is not automatically an error. In fact, the absence of the mint mark is exactly what you should expect to see on a normal 1967 Roosevelt dime. The 1967 Roosevelt dime features the portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse. You will see Liberty above his portrait, In God We Trust, to the left, and the date 1967 at the bottom. If you look near Roosevelt's neck and do not see a P, D, or S mint mark, that is normal for this year. The reverse features a torch in the center, surrounded by an olive branch and an oak branch, with United States of America and one dime around the design. One of the most important facts about this coin is that more than 2.2 billion regular 1967 Roosevelt dimes were produced. New Mista lists the circulation mintage at approximately 2,244,007,320 pieces. Because such an enormous number were struck, ordinary circulated examples are very common today. Now, let's talk about the metal. The 1967 Roosevelt dime is not made from the 90% silver composition used on Roosevelt dimes dated 1964 and earlier. Instead, it is a copper nickel-clad coin created during the transition away from silver circulating coinage. This distinction is extremely important when determining value. If someone tells you that every 1967 dime is automatically a silver dime because it is from the 1960s, that information is incorrect. So, what is a normal 1967 Roosevelt dime worth today? If your coin is circulated and shows ordinary wear from years of use, its value is generally close to $200 value. Current market guides show circulated examples around $700 depending on condition and the specific marketplace. New Mista's current guide lists approximately $100 for good and very good examples, with values increasing modestly through higher circulated grades. That means if your 1967 dime is scratched, worn, dirty, and has been heavily circulated, you probably do have a fortune. Its realistic value may be around $260 value. However, this is where coin collecting becomes interesting. A 1967 dime in exceptional condition can be worth much more than a normal circulated example. Condition is one of the biggest factors in determining the value of this coin. A heavily worn dime has lost much of its original detail, while an uncirculated example can still show strong design details and original mint luster. Current price data from New Mista shows ordinary 1967 examples reaching substantially higher values at very high mint state grades, including approximately $16 at Ms. 67 and hundreds of dollars at Ms. 68. Another important feature collectors examine on Roosevelt dimes is the torch on the reverse. Look closely at the horizontal bands across the torch. On high-grade coins, collectors may look for strong separation and complete bands, often referred to as full bands or FB. A high-grade 1967 dime with exceptional strike quality and full bands can be significantly more desirable than an ordinary example. This is why two 1967 Roosevelt dimes that look almost identical to a beginner can have completely different market values. One might be worth 500, while another exceptionally preserved and professionally graded example could be worth hundreds or even more. The difference is not simply the date. It is the combination of condition, strike quality, surface preservation, and collector demand. There is another fascinating possibility with 1967 dimes: genuine mint errors. Because millions of coins were produced, collectors sometimes discover pieces with unusual striking characteristics. Examples of valuable errors can include major off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other legitimate mint-made abnormalities. Coin World Records auction examples of major 1967 dime errors, including an approximately 50% off-center strike that sold for $903 and a major curved clip that sold for $790. However, you need to be careful when searching for errors. Damage that happens after a coin leaves the mint is not considered a valuable mint error. Scratches, dents, corrosion, polishing, machine damage, or environmental damage can make a dime look unusual without adding collectible value. A genuine error should show characteristics consistent with something that happened during the minting process. There is also a very important distinction between regular 1967 circulation strikes and 1967 special mint set coins. The mint produced a relatively small number of special mint set coins in 1967, approximately 1,863,344, according to New Mista. These coins can have noticeably better surfaces and presentation than ordinary circulation pieces, and exceptional SMS examples can command much higher prices. If your 1967 dime looks unusually sharp, brilliant, and carefully struck, do not immediately assume that it is a rare error. It could potentially be a special mint set example. The original packaging and the coin's surface characteristics can help determine its status. Professional grading can also be useful for coins that appear exceptional. Let's make the value guide simple. A normal worn 1967 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark is generally worth around its 10-cent face value. A better circulated example may bring a small premium. Ordinary uncirculated pieces can be worth more, while high-grade mint state coins can move into the dollar range and beyond. Exceptional Ms. 67 and Ms. 68 examples can command significantly higher prices, and coins with full bands or legitimate major errors can be especially desirable. One current market source lists an ungraded 1967 Roosevelt dime around $2.37 based on its sales database. But individual completed sales can be much lower or higher, depending on the coin's actual condition and whether it is a regular circulation strike, a high-grade example, or something special. For example, recent sales shown by the same source include ordinary 1967 examples selling for around 25 cents and uncirculated examples selling for around $2. This is a good reminder that asking prices and guide prices are not the same as what every coin will actually sell for. If you have a 1967 Roosevelt dime, the first thing you should do is check the condition. Look at Roosevelt's hair and cheek on the obverse. Examine the lettering for sharpness. Then turn the coin over and inspect the torch, especially the horizontal bands. Look for strong details and original luster. Finally, inspect the entire coin for unusual shapes, missing sections, or major striking abnormalities, and please do not clean the coin. Cleaning can permanently damage the surface and reduce collector appeal. If you believe your 1967 dime might be unusually valuable, keep it in its original condition and consider having it examined by a reputable professional grading or authentication service. Is a 1967 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark rare? The missing mint mark itself is rare at all. It is completely normal for this year because mint marks were intentionally omitted from US coins during this period. But that does not make the coin boring. The huge number of coins produced means ordinary circulated pieces are common, while truly exceptional, high-grade coins, full bands examples, special mint set pieces, and genuine mint errors can be much more interesting to collectors. The biggest lesson is simple: Never judge a coin's value only by its age or by the fact that it has no mint mark. Always check the year, composition, condition, strike quality, and possible errors. A coin that looks ordinary at first can sometimes become much more interesting after careful examination. Next up, a United States 1 dime coin dated 1992, with no mint mark, and in rusty or heavily worn condition. If you found a 1992 Roosevelt dime and notice that there is no letter under or near the date, you might immediately wonder if the missing mint mark makes this coin rare. But before you get excited, there is an important detail you need to know about identifying a 1992 dime correctly. The 1992 Roosevelt dime was struck at multiple U.S. mint facilities. The Philadelphia issue carries a P mint mark, while the Denver issue carries a D mint mark. A normal 1992 circulation dime should therefore have a mint mark. If your 1992 dime truly has no mint mark, you should take a closer look before deciding that it is a rare mint error. Heavy corrosion, rust-like discoloration, scratches, or surface damage can sometimes obscure a very small mint mark and make it appear to be missing. The 1992 Roosevelt dime features the famous portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse. Roosevelt faces left, with Liberty around the upper edge, "In God We Trust" beside his portrait, and the date 1992 below. The reverse features the torch of liberty in the center, surrounded by an olive branch and an oak branch. Around the design are the words United States of America, a pluribus unum, and 1 dime. The normal 1992 Philadelphia Roosevelt dime had a very large mintage of 593,500,000 coins. The Denver issue had an even larger mintage of 616,273,932. These numbers tell us that ordinary 1992 Roosevelt dimes are not rare simply because they are more than 30 years old. Now let's talk about the condition of your coin. You described it as rusty, and this is extremely important when estimating its value. Roosevelt dimes from 1992 are copper nickel-clad coins. They are not the 90% silver dimes that were produced for circulation before 1965. The standard composition is approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. With a copper core, because your coin is rusty or heavily damaged, its collectible value is likely to be very low unless it has another unusual characteristic. In normal circulated condition, published guides put 1992 Philadelphia examples around face value to modest premiums depending on grade. Numista's current figures show the 1992P around 10 cents in good condition, with values increasing gradually in higher grades. Another current guide estimates circulated 1992P examples at roughly $600.so. If your 1992 dime is heavily worn, rusty looking, scratched, or corroded, a realistic market expectation is generally around $100. The absence of a visible mint mark does not automatically turn this worn dime into a valuable rarity. However, there is an important exception. If the coin genuinely left the mint without a required mint mark, and the missing mark can be proven to be a mint-made error rather than damage or wear, that could make the coin much more interesting. But this is where professional examination becomes important. You should never assume that a missing letter is automatically a rare error. Look very carefully at the area where the mint mark should be. On a 1992P dime, the P is located on the obverse near the lower right side of Roosevelt's portrait. If the surface is heavily corroded, the small letter can become difficult to see. Dirt, scratches, chemical exposure, or wear can also make the area look completely blank. Another important thing to remember is that the term rusty does not necessarily mean actual iron rust. Since the coin is primarily copper and nickel rather than iron, reddish-brown or dark discoloration can result from environmental exposure, oxidation, chemicals, or other forms of surface damage. This type of damage usually does not increase the coin's value. In fact, severe corrosion can reduce collector appeal. Now, let's talk about what collectors really want to see on a 1992 Roosevelt dime. One of the biggest factors is condition. A coin with strong original luster, sharp details, and very few marks can be worth significantly more than a worn example. Current APMEX pricing data shows 1992p examples moving from about $100 in about uncirculated condition to around $200 in uncirculated condition, with higher mint state grades reaching several dollars or more. Professional grading can make an even bigger difference at the highest grades. PCGs currently lists 1992p Roosevelt dimes at values ranging from several dollars in lower mint state grades to hundreds of dollars for an exceptional Ms. 68 example. The full bands designation can create an even larger premium, with PCGs values reaching substantially higher levels for exceptional full bands specimens. Full bands are especially interesting because collectors examine the horizontal bands crossing the torch on the reverse. If those bands are sharply struck and completely separated, the coin may qualify for a full bands designation. But remember, this is generally relevant to high-grade coins with strong surfaces and sharp strikes. A rusty, heavily circulated 1992 dime would normally not qualify for the kind of premium associated with elite full bands examples. There is also a major difference between a coin being listed for a high price and actually selling for that amount. You may see online advertisements claiming that an ordinary 1992 dime is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Do not automatically believe those claims. Asking prices are not the same as completed sales. Actual market value depends on condition, authentication, certification, rarity, and what buyers are willing to pay. So let's create a simple value guide for this 1992 dime. If it is a normal, heavily circulated example with damage and no identifiable mint error, expect approximately $800. If it is a cleaner circulated example, it may bring a small premium. If it is uncirculated and attractive, values can reach a few dollars. If it is professionally graded in an exceptionally high mint state grade, the value can rise considerably. And if it has a genuine major mint error or exceptional full bands quality, the value could be much higher. The biggest mystery with your particular coin is the missing mint mark. Since a normal 1992 Philadelphia dime should have a P, and the Denver version should have a D, a completely blank mint mark area deserves a careful inspection. But because your coin is rusty and damaged, the first possibility to consider is that the mint mark has simply been obscured or damaged. Do not clean the coin to try to reveal the mint mark. This is extremely important. Scrubbing, polishing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently damage the surface and destroy whatever collectible value the coin might have. If you suspect that the coin could have a genuine mint error, photograph both sides clearly and consider showing it to a professional numismatist or grading service. The 1992 Roosevelt dime is a great reminder that coin collecting is not just about finding an old date. Sometimes the most important clue is a tiny mint mark, an unusual strike, or an exceptionally preserved surface. A normal 1992 dime is common, but an unusual example can still be worth investigating. So if you have a rusty 1992 Roosevelt dime with no visible mint mark, don't assume that you have discovered a fortune, but don't ignore it either. Check the mint mark area carefully, examine the coin for signs of damage, inspect the reverse torch for unusual details, and look for genuine mint-made errors. If the coin is simply worn and damaged, its value is likely close to face value. If the missing mint mark can be proven to be a genuine mint error, that is a completely different story, and that is what makes searching through old coins so exciting. Even a small 10-cent piece can raise questions about where it was made, how it was used, how it survived, and whether something unusual happened during production. Next up, a United States 1-dime coin from 1975 with the D mint mark, and this particular coin is in good condition. If you have a 1975D Roosevelt dime sitting in an old collection, coin jar, or pocket change, you may be wondering if this small 10-cent coin could be worth more than its face value. In this video, we are going to examine the 1975D Roosevelt dime, explain where it was made, discuss its condition, look at today's approximate market values, and reveal what special features could make one example much more valuable. The coin we are talking about today is the 1975D Roosevelt dime. The D mint mark tells us that this dime was struck at the Denver Mint. You can find the D on the obverse, near the lower right side of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait. The date 1975 appears at the bottom of the coin. If your dime clearly shows a D next to the date area, you have the Denver issue. The 1975D Roosevelt dime is part of the long-running Roosevelt dime series, which began in 1946 after the death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The design was created by John R. Sinek, and Roosevelt's portrait has remained on the dime ever since. The reverse features the famous Torch of Liberty, surrounded by an olive branch and an oak branch. Above the design is United States of America, while one dime appears below, with e pluribus unum between the design elements. Now, let's talk about the mintage. The Denver Mint produced approximately 4.71 billion 1975D Roosevelt dimes for circulation. That is an enormous number of coins. Because of this large production, an ordinary 1975D dime is not considered rare simply because it is nearly 50 years old. Millions of examples have survived, and circulated pieces are generally easy for collectors to find. Another important detail is the metal composition. The 1975D Roosevelt dime is not a 90% silver dime. Silver Roosevelt dimes were produced for regular circulation through 1964. Starting in 1965, the United States changed the composition of the dime to copper-nickel clad because of rising silver prices and a nationwide coin shortage. The 1975D dime therefore has a copper-nickel outer layer over a copper core. This means that if you have a normal 1975D dime in good circulated condition, its value is generally not based on silver content. Its collectible value comes primarily from its condition, minting characteristics, errors, varieties, and collector demand. So, what is your 1975D dime worth today? For an ordinary circulated example in good condition, the realistic value is usually around 800, with some examples bringing a small premium depending on condition and the marketplace. Current price guides generally show circulated 1975D Roosevelt dimes at only a modest premium over face value, while higher grade uncirculated examples can be worth more. If your coin is heavily circulated, you may notice considerable wear on Roosevelt's hair, cheek, and the lettering. The reverse torch and branches may also have lost some of their original detail. Scratches, contact marks, discoloration, and small dents can further reduce collector appeal. A coin in this condition is normally considered a common circulated example. However, there is a major difference between a good condition circulated dime and a high-grade uncirculated example. A high-grade coin can preserve much of its original mint luster and sharp design details. Collectors often look for coins with clean surfaces, strong strikes, and minimal contact marks. The better the preservation, the more interesting the coin becomes. One of the most important areas collectors inspect on a Roosevelt dime is the reverse torch. Look closely at the horizontal bands crossing the torch. On exceptional coins, those bands can be sharply defined and fully separated. These coins may receive a full bands designation when professionally graded. Full bands examples in high mint state grades can be significantly more valuable than ordinary circulated pieces, but there is something important to remember. A 1975D dime in good circulated condition should not be compared directly with the professionally graded high mint state full bands example. They are essentially different levels of the market. A coin can have the same year and mint mark, but a completely different value because of its condition. Now, let's talk about errors. This is where your 1975D dime could become much more interesting. Genuine mint errors can include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, die cracks, and other abnormalities that occur during the minting process. A major, clearly visible mint error can sometimes bring a substantial premium over a normal dime. However, collectors need to be extremely careful. Damage that happened after the coin left the mint is not considered a valuable mint error. Scratches, dents, corrosion, holes, bending, grinding, or damage from machinery can make a coin look unusual. But these problems normally reduce value rather than increase it. If you think your 1975D dime has an unusual feature, examine it carefully under good lighting. Check the date and mint mark first. Then inspect the rim around the entire coin. Look for missing portions, unusual shapes, doubling, or design elements that appear to have been struck incorrectly. Compare your coin with photographs of normal 1975D Roosevelt dimes before deciding that something is an error. Another important warning is about online prices. You may find advertisements claiming that ordinary 1975D dimes are worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Those asking prices do not automatically represent real market value. A seller can ask almost any price for a coin, but what matters much more is documented, completed sales, and professional market information. For a normal 1975D Roosevelt dime in good condition, you should generally think in terms of cents rather than hundreds of dollars. The face value is 10 cents, and a typical circulated example may bring only a small premium. Better preserved uncirculated coins can be worth more, while very high-grade certified examples and legitimate major errors can command significantly higher prices. Let's make the value guide simple. A heavily circulated 1975D Roosevelt dime is generally around face value. A better circulated example may bring slightly more, depending on its appearance. An about uncirculated example can bring a modest premium, while ordinary mint state coins can reach into the dollar range depending on grade. Exceptional certified specimens with very high grades, strong strikes, and desirable full bands characteristics can be worth considerably more. If your 1975D dime is simply a normal, good condition coin, don't be disappointed. It is still an important piece of American history. This dime was produced during the 1970s, when the United States was using the new copper-nickel clad composition for everyday coins. It has passed through decades of American commerce, and may have traveled through countless hands before reaching your collection. And remember, never clean your coin. This is one of the most important rules for coin collectors. Scrubbing or polishing can leave permanent marks and unnatural surfaces. Even if your 1975D dime looks dirty or dark, keeping the original surface intact is usually better than trying to make the coin shine. If you want to protect the coin, place it in a non-PVC coin holder or another suitable storage system. Avoid touching the surfaces unnecessarily and hold the dime by its edges. If you believe you have a major mint error or an exceptionally high-grade example, professional authentication and grading may be worth considering. The 1975D Roosevelt dime may not be a rare fortune coin in ordinary circulated condition, but it is a great example of why understanding condition and mint marks matters. The D tells us where the coin was made, the date tells us when it was produced, and the condition tells us a large part of its potential collectible value. So, before you spend your 1975D dime, take a moment to examine it. Check the D mint mark, inspect the date, study the portrait, turn it over and examine the torch, and look closely for unusual mint-made characteristics. If it is a normal circulated coin, its value will probably remain close to 700. But if you discover an unusual error or an exceptionally preserved example, you may have a much more interesting piece. That is the fun of coin collecting. You don't need to start with an expensive ancient coin or a famous rarity. Sometimes a simple 10-cent piece from your pocket can teach you something fascinating about American history, the United States Mint, and the coin market. Next up, a United States 1-dime coin from 1982 with the P mint mark. If you have a 1982P Roosevelt dime in your collection, you may be wondering whether this small 10-cent coin is worth more than face value. The answer depends heavily on its condition, appearance, and whether it has a genuine mint error or valuable variety. So let's take a close look at this coin and find out what the market says about the 1982P Roosevelt dime today. The 1982P Roosevelt dime was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and the P mint mark is located on the obverse near the lower right side of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait. The coin features Roosevelt facing left, with Liberty above his head, "In God We Trust" beside the portrait, and the date 1982 at the bottom. On the reverse, you will find the Torch of Liberty, surrounded by an olive branch and an oak branch, along with United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 dime. The 1982p Roosevelt dime is especially interesting because the early 1980s were an important period for American coin collecting. Large quantities of dimes were being produced for everyday circulation, but collectors began paying close attention to varieties and mint errors. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 519,475,000 regular 198p Roosevelt dimes, making the normal issue relatively common. Like other Roosevelt dimes dated after 1964, the 1982p dime is made from copper nickel-clad material rather than the 90% silver composition used on earlier Roosevelt dimes. The coin has a copper core with outer layers containing copper and nickel. This means that an ordinary 1982p dime should not be valued based on silver content. Its collectible value comes mainly from condition, rarity, errors, and collector demand. Now, let's get to the most important question. How much is a 1982p Roosevelt dime worth today? If your coin is a normal circulated example with noticeable wear, the value is generally around its 10-cent face value. Although some circulated examples may bring a small premium depending on condition and the buyer, current coin value guides generally place worn 1982p examples at only a modest amount above face value. If your 1982p dime has been in circulation for decades, you may see wear on Roosevelt's hair, cheek, and the lettering. The reverse torch may also have lost some of its detail. Small scratches and contact marks are normal on circulated coins. A coin in this condition is usually considered common, so it is not likely to be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. But here is where the 1982p Roosevelt dime becomes much more interesting. There are known varieties and errors associated with the 1982p issue, and some can command substantial premiums. One of the most famous is the 1982p No-P Roosevelt dime. This variety is especially important because the Philadelphia Mint normally placed a P mint mark on the coin, but some 1982p dimes were struck without the P mint mark. If you have a 1982 dime and there is no P mint mark, do not assume it is the rare no-P variety immediately. The coin needs to be examined carefully. The genuine 1982 no-P Roosevelt dime is a recognized variety, and its value can be dramatically higher than a normal 1982p dime. Professional authentication is strongly recommended for an example that appears to match this variety. This is one of the most important things you should check on your 1982 Roosevelt dime. Look directly at the area near Roosevelt's neck, where the P mint mark should appear. If you see a clear P, you have the normal 1982p issue. If the area appears completely blank, take a closer look under good lighting and magnification. Make sure the mint mark has not simply been worn away, damaged, altered, or hidden by dirt. A genuine, missing mint mark can be extremely interesting because it is not simply a coin that became damaged after leaving the mint. It represents a production characteristic that occurred during the minting process. This is why collectors are willing to pay much more for authenticated examples. The condition of the coin also matters enormously. A normal circulated 1982p dime may be worth close to $600, while a high-grade example with excellent surfaces and original luster can be worth more. Collectors look for coins with sharp details, minimal contact marks, strong luster, and excellent overall eye appeal. Another feature collectors examine on Roosevelt dimes is the reverse torch. Look closely at the horizontal bands across the torch. High-grade examples with sharply separated bands can qualify for full bands or FB designations from professional grading services. Full bands coins are often more desirable because they demonstrate a strong strike and excellent preservation. However, don't confuse a normal circulated 1982p dime with the high-grade certified specimen. A coin that has been handled and circulated for decades will usually have too much wear and too many marks to compete with the finest mint state examples. That's why professional grade can make such a major difference in the market. Let's talk about errors as well. Besides the famous no-P variety, collectors should watch for genuine mint-made abnormalities such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, die cracks, and other striking errors. A major error that is clearly visible and can be authenticated may be worth significantly more than a normal 10-cent coin, but be very careful with damaged coins. Scratches, dents, discoloration, corrosion, polishing, holes, and other post-mint damage are not normally valuable errors. Sometimes damage can create the illusion of doubling or missing design details. Always compare the coin with a normal example, and, if necessary, have it examined by a professional. Now, let's create a practical value guide. A normal 1982p Roosevelt dime in heavily circulated condition is generally worth around 10 cents to a small premium. A better circulated example may be worth somewhat more. An about uncirculated example can bring a modest premium, while mint state examples can move into the dollar range or higher depending on grade. Exceptional certified specimens can command much more, and a genuine 1982 no-P variety or major mint error can be worth substantially more than a normal 1982p dime. This is why you should not judge your coin's value only by its age. A 1982 dime is more than 40 years old, but age alone does not make it rare. The number of coins produced, how many survived, their condition, and whether they contain recognized varieties are much more important. If your 1982p dime is dirty or dark, do not clean it. Never use polishing compounds, abrasive materials, chemicals, or household cleaners on a potentially collectible coin. Cleaning can leave permanent hairlines and damage the original surface. If you think you have a valuable variety, preserving the coin exactly as you found it is usually the best choice. So, if you have a 1982p Roosevelt dime, take a close look at it before spending it. First, confirm the date. Then check the P mint mark. Examine Roosevelt's portrait and the reverse torch. Look for unusual striking characteristics and carefully inspect the surfaces. Most importantly, if the P appears to be missing, investigate the possibility of the famous 1980 no-P variety before deciding that the coin is ordinary. The 1982p Roosevelt dime is a perfect example of how a tiny detail can completely change a coin's story. A normal example may be worth only face value, but a recognized variety or genuine mint error can transform that same date into a much more collectible piece. So what should you remember? A regular circulated 1982p Roosevelt dime is generally a common coin worth around $700. Higher grade examples can be worth more, while exceptional, certified pieces can bring significantly higher prices. But if your 1982 dime is missing the P mint mark, stop and inspect it carefully because that could be the most important feature on the entire coin. If you enjoyed this 1982p Roosevelt dime value guide, make sure you subscribe to Coin Reveal USA for more US coin values, rare mint errors, Roosevelt dimes, Washington quarters, Jefferson nickels, wheat pennies, and fascinating coin discoveries. Keep checking your change, old coin jars, and collections, because sometimes the smallest detail can make the biggest difference. Thanks for watching Coin Reveal USA, and keep revealing the value hidden in your coins.